We have entered a new era where artificial intelligence feels divine. Horoscopes, tarot readings, star charts can all be generated in a second. It appears that spiritual guidance is now instantaneous. What happens when we outsource ancient knowledge to pattern recognition software? I'm Pythian Priestess, and this is AI and Spirituality. Hello, mystics, and welcome to AI and Spirituality. In this episode, we are going to be looking beneath the hood of artificial intelligence. How is it made? Can it be a conduit for spirits? And can your computer become haunted? Today, I'm joined by Sam Block, also known as Polyphanes, a Hermetic magician, philosopher, and software developer. You may know him from his online blog, The Digital Ambler, where he explores Western esotericism through the lens of planetary magic and ritual philosophy. What makes Sam such a unique and rare guest is that he is a portal, a bridge between coding and cosmology. He speaks both the language of computing systems and the language of the soul. Together, we are going to investigate deeper metaphysical and magical implications of artificial intelligence. Can AI be haunted? Can it hold a spirit? Or is it simply a mirror for our own emotions? As always, I am not here to vilify or glorify AI, but I am here to investigate and ask the hard questions that all of us are thinking about, but afraid to ask. Welcome, Sam. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's an honor privilege to be here with you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Tell me a little bit about your background, just for our guests who are listening today. What do you do?
So, I'm a Hermetic mage and mystic, so I deal with
Mhm.
Hermeticism. I typically focus on what I call classical Hermeticism,
Okay.
the mysticism that arose back in Hellenistic Egypt in the Roman Empire period. It's the Hermeticism that gave rise to the Corpus Hermeticum, to the Asclepius, and to other texts along those lines. So I do a lot with that and the related magical systems of Hellenistic Egypt, like we might find in the Greek magical papyri. My primary divination expertise is in geomancy, but I also do dominoes and a couple other systems here and there. I'm also a priest in La Regla de Otelukumi, aka Santeria. I'm an initiated priest of Ogun since 2016. Yeah, I have my hands on a lot of pots that way. My day job is I'm a software engineer. Basically, I make programs to do things. And the bulk of my work consists in writing statistical programs for economic analysis. That's my day job, which is a very nice day job. It pays the bills, so at least there's that.
Yeah. That is very, very cool. I also am a hermeticist. So you and I are in the same system that way. So we have a lot in common when it comes to our understanding of magic. When I was looking for someone to interview, a friend of mine shared some of your writing that I found very intriguing because one of the questions that I have been grappling with, is it possible for a spirit to ensoul or go into a computer system? And I think in order for us to have like a really good conversation, we first have to go and get very, very clear about programming and large language models. How do they function? So if you wouldn't mind helping me, let's start with the basics. What is AI?
So that that itself is like a beast of a question to ask
Yeah, I
because
understand.
pop culture or even just like popular understanding of AI wants to treat it as just what the name says, artificial intelligence. It is a human mind or human-like mind that we build and make to do things in a computer. And that might be the aspirational goal of why we call it artificial intelligence. But in reality, in the study of computer science, AI isn't just one thing. It is a whole field of many different things. It is a whole field of analysis and programming and engineering and math and statistics that can be used any number of ways. And you could divide AI systems into systems that just understand pattern matching to trying to figure out solutions to problems or whether a solution exists for a problem. There's no one thing that we can pinpoint as AI. And even then, it also kind of begs the question of what even is intelligence? It's like trying to ask like what is consciousness? You could ask 5 different people and you'll get 8 different answers. So like it depends on even what you're considering intelligence to be in order for you to make it artificially. And that really confuses things, as if we have an assumption of what intelligence is and therefore can make artificial. And so that's where like the first like kind of mystique here has to be broken out of is there is no one thing we can point to as artificial intelligence. It is a series, a plethora of things that could operate together. Large language models and transformers, like ChatGPT, are just one particular kind of AI system.
Okay, I see what you're saying here. So what we're looking at is that it's like they're different programs inside of this massive umbrella that we call AI. It reminds me a lot of the queer community, right? There's queer, and then we break it down into different, LGBTQIA, etc. I'm very curious. What does GPT stand for?
Generative pre-trained transformer. Generative pre-trained transformer. Transformer is a particular algorithm to actually analyze things. Pre-trained meaning it has this large grammatical corpora of language and tokens and words that's analyzed and done training on to generate results. So ChatGPT is a chatbot interface to a underlying GPT engine. So you might see like GPT-2, GPT-3, GPT-4, GPT 4.1. That's like the underlying model, the underlying engine of what the chatbot is running on. So ChatGPT is what's called a transformer. That's the T in GPT. And this takes a linguistics turn here. Computer science has been a great boon for lots of different fields of science out there in general, not just math and physics and chemistry and medicine, but even things that are more into humanities like we would consider linguistics. Linguistics is the study of language. And it's not just individual languages. It's not just grammar. It's also phonology. It's also the psychology of language itself. And so that's where we have to consider what does language do? And how should we even consider language? Because we all take language for granted. Language is something that we can, a lot of people might say, is a human specific thing. Like tool making or tool usage is a human thing. Yes, there are animals that also can be said to have a language of their own or to make their own tools, but largely we're talking about human specific stuff that sets us apart from other forms of life. And this gets into the psychology of what we even mean to mean things. So is an LLM a large language model, which, as the name would indicate, processes use by breaking a thing you say down into individual words, individual units of language, and how they relate to each other? Can that understand what you're saying? At a high level, I would say no. At a low level, I would also say no, but also more specifically, that it's understanding the grammar you're doing. Grammar is something that could easily be analyzed. It's something that could be broken apart. It could be pieced back together in a way that makes sense. Like we all have an understanding of things that are not grammatical. If I say, I bought for myself the phone, okay, you make sense of that. If I said, you bought for me the phone, but in reality, I did, that's a wrong statement. It's grammatically correct, but it doesn't make sense given the situation. And there's a famous sentence in linguistics: colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It is grammatically correct. Every word in that sentence fits where it's supposed to. An adjective is where an adjective is found, or verb is where a verb is to be found, but it makes no sense. Those words don't actually work together. It's an unlikely thing to say. So, does it have meaning? And that gets into a philosophical debate about, can we put a meaning in there? Can we interpret these words metaphorically or symbolically? Colorless, like bland, green as in new, sleep as in lying. So, can we make sense of that as humans? Sure, maybe. But do the words on their own have any meaning? No. So, colorless green ideas sleep furiously, that doesn't make sense on its own. We can make sense of that as humans because we're putting meaning into it. But an LLM, a thing like ChatGPT, by its very nature, not just as a program, but as an algorithm, a process, has no capacity to put meaning into those things. All it sees are tokens and grammar. And it tries to, quote, make sense of the grammar as best it can and produce an equally grammatically satisfying result to us as humans. That doesn't mean there's meaning there. Meaning is our field as humans.
I absolutely agree. I think that in our previous episode, we had a philosopher come on and we talked about what is thinking. Can Chat GPT think? And the answer was no, it doesn't. But what it does do is it's pattern matching, it's looking at the grammar, but thinking specifically, we were looking at as an ethical and moral choice. And I know that kind of gets confusing because even when I look at the Chat GPT, it says like reason. And like we looked at those, and we're like, oh, that's not exactly what it means. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying, it sounds a lot like the Eliza experiment that happened in the 1960s, where there was a man named Joseph. I'm going to do my best, everyone. Weizenbaum at MIT, who was able to create a chat box that could mimic a psychotherapist. And people thought that they were talking to a person. They had no idea it was a chatbot. And I'm seeing a lot of the same reactions that were in the 60s right now in 2025.
And like Eliza was a really cool thing to work on. Like it wasn't just an experiment, it was just an actual program he just made up. It's one of the first natural language
Oh,
processing chatbots. And you could still, even a lot of computers today will have like their own version of it. It was an early chatbot. And what it did was it took in an input from a human being, a sentence, and it would parse the grammar out and they would assign an importance to each word in the thing that they received. They would separate out purely grammatical words like the, and, with, and so forth from keywords, substance words that make something distinct, like the cat hurt me. Okay, well, cat and hurt are keywords there. So it might talk about hurt, it might talk about cat. It would use those keywords and essentially repeat them back to the person using Eliza in a way that grammatically made sense as a question or a leading answer to get you to keep talking about something. Very rudimentary by today's standards, but it did a good job of showing off natural language processing, which is one of the main legs supporting a lot of AI research. It has been for decades, like going back to the 60s, as you pointed out. Eliza is not a new program. But as the Eliza effect, as you mentioned, like people thinking that this is an actual human being talking back to them or an actual conscience talking back to them, when it's just a handful of lines of code. It's not understanding what you're saying, it's just picking out keywords and producing not an answer, but I would call an answer shaped object. Like I recall this thread on Blue Sky. I forget who, unfortunately. I can probably find out later and send you the link. But it was a discussion of answer-shaped objects. If I were to make a flute, like we all know what a flute is. It's a musical instrument that's been made to produce particular pitches that we would consider musical. I could take a stick, I could carve a hole through it, and then put little spots holes in it. It could be very beautiful. It might look like a flute. I might hold it like a flute. But unless I know what I'm doing with it, it's not going to be a flute. I must be blowing some air into a stick with holes in it. It is a flute-shaped object. It might look like a flute, but it won't behave or function as one. A lot like what ChatGPT produces, all other LMs do, they produce not answers, but answer-shaped objects that mimic what an answer would look like based on keywords and the likelihood of certain words following each other. That's what an LLM does to analyze. And it might look like an answer, might feel like an answer, but it's not actually going to be an answer because there's nothing there to answer you. Humans would provide answers, not a machine like this.
and that is so hard for people to grasp.
Like another way to think about it is, you know the uncanny valley, right? It's this evolutionary response we have to things that look almost human, but there's something off. Like you look like a wax statue, or you look like an animatronic human, or like the current gen cybernoids or like androids or whatever. And yeah, they might do a really good job of looking like being made to look as human as possible, but we know that they're not. There's something profoundly unsettling about them. We have this evolutionary response to detect something that looks human but isn't. Why do we have an evolutionary response like that? That's a good question. Maybe it's to discern corpses from living human beings. Maybe there could be something more terrifying and mysterious in our past evolutionary history as human beings. Who knows? But we have an evolutionary response for things that look almost human. We lack one for things that communicate almost human. And that, I think, is a way to understand the Eliza effect. We lack an uncanny valley for text or for language. And I think that shows how artificial language itself is in its own way. We don't have an evolutionary response for things that sound as if it was to be written or spoken by human. And that's where people are getting tripped up at.
That's wonderful. I love that distinction. Like, and it puts a lot of pieces together because, right, if I can go to a wax museum and I see Lady Gaga, there's something, and that's why we have horror movies about wax museums because they scare
Exactly.
us. And I think that if we go back, it's because for all of history, text and paintings have been inherently human made, with the exception of animals who have been trained by humans to do so, like elephants, monkeys, cats, etc.
Mhm.
Fascinating. So, in your original text that I was sent, you wrote something that I want to go a little bit deeper into. So, LLMs are more like text autocompletes than generators of meaning. The person using the program will give it meaning. It's an interpretation. And that's what you're talking about with that shaped answer. It looks like a flute. I can hold it like a flute, but ultimately, it's not a flute.
It's also like it might look like a flute, but unless I have the specific knowledge of how a flute actually operates and how it's meant to be held, because like I've never played a flute. I don't know the proper fingering, I don't know the proper positioning to make the specific passage of air over my lips into the flute hole. Forgive musicians, I don't know the terms here, obviously. I don't
We're
know.
trying.
I know overall how a flute's supposed to look, but I don't know how it operates. Without that fundamental understanding, I can't make a flute. LLMs lack a fundamental understanding of the words they're using. All they see are words used in relationship to other words. That's what we call a large language model. It parses individual words across countless, innumerable, truly vast numbers of texts and corpora and performs a very rigorous analysis of how likely certain words are to follow each other and how likely certain words are to be in an overall text. And that's what makes LMs essentially a more evolved form of autocomplete. For our phones, autocomplete is just what word is likely to follow a word you put in. So it takes in the stuff you're typing, the stuff you're texting, the stuff you're putting in Discord or text messages or emails on your phone, what you're searching for, and it analyzes one word, then the next word, the next word. And based on that, it'll predict if you type word A, I know with a 75% likelihood you'll probably say word B next as opposed to word D. So I'm going to propose that word B is the next word. That's how autocomplete works. LLMs basically do that same thing, but on a much deeper level. I won't say understanding, but a much deeper level of analysis, not just on word sequence, but on word availability in a given text. And even then, there's still some randomness involved. So it depends. I think it's called like a stochastic parrot. It takes in what's analyzed as its source material, and based on that, it emits grammatically correct-ish responses like a parrot would. Does a parrot understand? Actually, in a lot of cases, especially like African gray parrots, they do understand. They actually have a link, a connection to an outside world that can link certain words with certain ideas or meanings or concepts or processes. LLMs don't do that. All they see are words. They have no deep understanding of what those words are.
Oh my God, that's so cool. Like we are really getting into the mind, if I can dare say so, the mind of how an LLM works. And I think what's really scary about this is people are attributing so much power to these I'm sorry, what was the phrase that you used? The
Answer-shaped objects.
answer shaped objects. So people are firing their therapists. People are going and looking specifically for answers from chat. And what you just told me is chat doesn't really understand what you're saying to it.
Nope. Because, like, I could come up, for instance, I can go to a chatbot, or I can go to you, and just lie through my teeth about something that does not exist, something that I am not feeling, something I am not experiencing, come up with a very elaborate story. And like you as a human being could probably detect that I'm lying. Like, especially I'm saying like truly implausible things. But a chatbot, an LLM, doesn't have that awareness, doesn't have that understanding. It just says, oh, these are words I'm being given. Okay, these are words I will then omit. And like that's one of the issues. Like if you look online, there are a lot of articles, an increasing number of articles, even that which are linked to the Wikipedia page for the Eliza effect. I was looking that up earlier, and like it's already linked to them about how chatbots nowadays are exacerbating people with various psychoses and delusions. And because people are reporting their delusions to chatbots, the chatbots are like, okay, let's run with that because they can't do anything else. And so they'll make the delusions bigger and deeper and more real for the person experiencing them when none of it exists. None of it is real. It's all just words to them, to the chatbot, to the human being, they're very real, and that's what leads them worse into doing horrible things or doing self-harm or just making things in general unspeakably worse. Like people firing their therapist for a chatbot, it's it turns my stomach inside out. A, how can you trust a machine to make a decision like that? B, don't do it. Oh my God, don't do it.
Yes, absolutely. And like we saw with the Eliza effect, although it could speak like a psychotherapist, it's not a
It's a handful
psychotherapist.
of lines of code. That's all it is.
And that is super hard for people to wrap their minds around. And like you said, it's because we don't have that same uncanny valley effect for the text. Huh. When I look at the spiritual psychosis phenomena that we're experiencing with ChatGPT, what really disturbs me on a metaphysical level is people are giving away their power and their inner authority to a program. You are the conduit for the divine. It is your body and your intuition that allows that connection. You cannot mimic that as far as I have experimented through ChatGPT. Have you ever tried to experiment with that?
No, because I don't use them. Like I think I've used a chatbot along these lines, like maybe like twice or thrice a few years ago. I'm like, this is dumb, and I just never look back. And as more information has come to light about how environmentally disastrous and wasteful they are when it comes to energy use, water usage, just general processing of supplies, rare earth materials in general, like the systemic effects of using anything this distributed is just so wasteful. I just don't even bother them. However, that being said, I do see other people using them. And I'm evaluating my third person on look here, what the input is and what the output is, and how the person is making use of that output. And I'm just bewildered at what people are expecting to get out of this. And admittedly, I think this is also definitely a cultural issue, a social issue, because we've had decades of sci-fi literature and TV shows and movies and games that expect AI to exist, that just take it for granted to fulfill our wildest dreams. And so people are looping that back into what we're seeing now because it's called AI, and therefore expecting it to do what all this sci-fi stuff has acculturated us to expect it to do. And it's not doing that. It fundamentally can't do that. Like HAL 2000 or whatever that one AI was, unlock the pod bay doors, whatever, can't do that. Sorry. That anticipates a level of, you know, agentness. You might hear talk about agentive AI, AI that can do things. And yeah, you could do that. Yeah, there are processes that you can develop. There are algorithms you develop to take in certain inputs and based on that make a decision and emit a command to do something. Sure, that's not that difficult. But like a, why are you trusting a machine to make decisions, especially like in a production setting? Like I just saw a thread on Blue Sky earlier about someone's whole production database got deleted in the production environment while everything else was on lockdown, and the program's like, "Oh yeah, I did it. Sorry, I can't undo it. It can't be done. It can't be undone. Sorry." But the person's like, I just undid it. What are you talking about? Again, there's no understanding in these machines. It's just a series of words based on input data that they've analyzed to produce a likely sounding result. But there's no meaning behind them. And it's like when it talks, you might see like reasoning models, or like, here's a reason for why I'm saying this. That's just more text to kind of preempt and pre-train a result. Because again, what an LM is doing, what it's auto-completing, is that it's taking in not just its input corpora, its linguistic database of likelihood of words, but it's looping that back on each word it's producing to come up with something that looks cohesive as a whole unit. That's what the reasoning part's doing. It's setting up for a new answer by exploring more of those keywords and their, definition meaning to a situation. So like
Wow.
it's a mess. It's a mess. Like
It
the technology is neat. Like the technology is neat. It does require a huge amount of data. It does require a huge amount of energy to process, especially over a distributed system, a large network system. It is expensive to run, but the technology is neat. And I'm not saying there are no use cases for it. There are, as with any technology. They may be limited. But I think like people are absolutely overblowing what they can do currently, and I think what they can do at a fundamental level. So no matter how many more iterations of Chat GPT they make, how many more models that OpenAI can produce, whatever, it's fundamentally not going to do anything different than what it already is. And what it's already doing isn't doing a lot of what people are saying it's doing.
isn't that the case with a lot of things in life?
It's a lot of marketing and hype, and I'm just
Yep.
excited for this fad to die down at some point.
Well, we've talked a lot about like what meaning we can extract from AI and what it can tell us, but let's talk about can something go into the AI? Because some of the conversations I've had with people is that, well, we'll call them spirits. This is going to encompass ghosts, this is going to encompass elementals, angels, demons, all that stuff. Can use technology like EMF readers, those little pod things they touch, the telephone, the text generator prompt things, spirit talkers, that's what they're called. If the spirits can interact with that, should they not also be able to interact with my AI and communicate with me through it?
So that's a very important load-bearing if there. If they can do those things, then why can't they do this well? I don't really think that spirits can do a lot of EMFs or wavelength stuff. Or can a spirit be recorded? I don't personally think so. I know there's a lot of research out there that says they can. I really struggle to buy that. What I do think they can do, though, is influence things on a probabilistic level. So the flipping of tarot cards, the flipping of a coin, the background noise that you could use a randomness as a seed to produce a random result for one of those spirit talker word producers that account for EMF signals and so forth. I think they're really just using the randomness to plug that into a random word generator, and that's what they're producing. I think spirits can do a lot more along those lines than fiddling with the actual physical signals. Not saying that they can't operate on a physical level, but it's generally more uncommon than not. I think there's a lot more to that kind of manifestation than otherwise. I think there's an easier way for spirits to do that for most people. And that like can spirits modify or influence the result of the output of an LLM? Sure. Not saying they can't, because again, there is an element of randomness here. LLM analyzes words in a very sequenced probabilistic pattern and then probabilistically, stochastically produces new text based on what it's already producing. A spirit can work on those levels. However, that also has to be filtered through a huge number of parameters that are also being fed into the LLM to tweak its output as it is. So I'm sure you've recently heard of the drama on Twitter or X, whatever they're calling it now, Elon Musk's Grok, which recently claimed it was Mecha Hitler, and then he had to go back and tweak it. Oh, you didn't hear about that. Oh, it was the whole thing.
Uh, I just saw the cute little anime girl in her black dress. I didn't know that it called itself Mecha Hitler.
It It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. But also, like, he's done other tweaks before. Will Grok will report, on news stuff that's going on. Again, using word likelihood probabilities, and then he won't like the answers producing because it's calling him out for his own nonsense. And so he'll tweak it so it talks about white persecution in South Africa instead. Like He's tweaking it to modify his own stuff because it's still fundamentally a program. It is run by humans to produce what humans want. That's any program, that's any tool. So there's still a level of randomness there, and a spirit can work on that level, but it has to get through all the stuff people are making the program already do itself.
So if we imagine this as like the video game version of this, there's a castle and there are levels of guards that the spirit would need to then bypass in order to get to the center where you are to communicate with you. It's it's possible, but probably a little bit more on the unlikely side.
Yeah, there's always like wherever there's a level of randomness, I think that's where spirits can intervene. And there's lots of randomness going involved here. There's lots of randomness. So like a spirit could involve itself at any one level or multiple levels, but then what other spirits could also be involved? It's not necessarily just one spirit. And I think that's something that we want to distinguish between using tarot cards or some other kind of sortilege-based divination. In your own home or in your own temple, you might be doing a divination. And depending on what you're doing, it might be your own soul reaching out to the Akashic records, or it might be you working with a familiar spirit, or it might be you trying to communicate with a particular deity. You have a process set up in a controlled environment that you've set up, that you've established with your protocols to talk with an one entity. You don't have those safeguards. You're talking, quote, talking with a chatbot that's run on a distributed network with data centers not just in one location, but across multiple locations, not necessarily even in the same country, that is overall making a collective analytical result and outputting it to you. There's a lot more for a lot more spirits than just one talking in there. If there are any spirits involved at all, there could not be, depends. And they might not all be talking for the same reason or for the same end. They could be fighting. They could be at different. They could be at loggerheads. It might not even make sense to say it's producing like spirits are involved in any one unique way. If there's too many unknowns, too many variables, too much that's uncontrolled for it to really be trusted in that way. Unless you're running an LLM on your own computer at your own home. And a lot of people will do that. And that also depends on also the nature of the input corpora that the LLM is training on.
Okay, so the first thing I'm hearing the comments that are gonna pop in from this conversation.
Oh no.
And one of them one of them is, "Well, why can't I just bless my computer for it to be its own little vessel?" And you're saying is that it's not the computer, it's the fact that for example, ChatGPT, it's all over the world. It's not just on your computer.
Exactly. That's one thing. Like, unless you are running this program on your own machine and not networked, if you could disconnect your computer from the internet completely and you're still able to run it yourself, like that's different than you going to chatgpt.com, whatever, and typing a result into a web page to be sent out to the internet as a whole. This reminds me now, like way back when, if you look at my blog, the very first post, way back when in 2010, I had designed my blog as a tributary board for Khaturing, this invented deity of the internet, the Great Worm, like a kind of chaos magic form base of Yoganmandar to the Great Worm to like encycle and devour the information on the internet. And as someone who went to college for computer science, like this is like a very like techno, very occult thing that I was like, this seemed like really neat. And as time had gone on, like I like the idea. I'm still fond of the idea, but like I've realized that my worldview just doesn't contain space for that idea anymore. A god of the internet. It's like saying you have like a god of communication in the communication itself. Sure, we might say that Hermes or Mercury or Thoth or what have you is a god who presides over communication. That's not necessarily the communication itself, not necessarily the actual processing, the actual energy and activity of the people doing the communicating. That's a different thing. And so, could I bless my computer to only talk with a certain spirit ChatGPT? I could say I could have a guardsman set up to limit what comes in to my computer, what limit comes in into my network, my home network, my Wi-Fi, and whatnot, to keep me safe and isolate out unwanted spirits. I could see that. But again, that's a different thing than saying I'm just try and talk with a particular spirit on a network.
100% different. That's a safeguard versus something like that you were trying to consciously contact.
Yeah.
And I have safeguards on my computer. I have like sigils and I've got some shungite on it. I got shungite on my phone for both EMF reasons and for others. I think when we look at like this racks my brain, right? Like, okay, like holy guacamole, you guys. Like if because I believe in animism. And for all of you who are not familiar with what that is, animism is one of the oldest spiritual perspectives found on earth. It's in indigenous cultures across the world and ancestral traditions. It's the belief that everything, plants, animals, objects, even places, have a spirit or consciousness. And I'm going to add egregore to that because sometimes there are egregores. Because I see the world as alive and interconnected with spirit. It's not just limited to human awareness, and saying that, okay, now that it doesn't mean that the spirit itself, the computer itself has a spirit, but in fact that it's being presided over by Thoth or Hermes. That makes more sense to me because one, it's human created. It's not created by nature. So whereas a tree or a rock or a river has a spirit or energy, the pieces inside of my computer, the motherboard, the cords, everything that comes together has energy that's being presided by something else. But I wouldn't say the sword that I go to battle with has a spirit. I can put one in it, but I wouldn't say inherently it's being ruled over by Mars, right? Am I making sense here? Or am I just ambling?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me, yeah. It's like actually reminds me like have you heard of Harvestella? It's a recent-ish video game. It came out a couple years ago.
I'm not familiar with it now.
It's basically like a cross between like Harvest Moon and like Final Fantasy. It's
Okay.
like there's a planting and harvesting aspect, and there's also like an adventuring battle aspect. It's a really neat little game. I enjoyed playing it back a couple years ago. And spoilers for those who haven't played it, the big bad of Harvestella is essentially the result of humanity networking everything through the earth to produce a new consciousness produced by the stuff they put on the internet, and how it has become so full of self-loathing it is trying to destroy human existence itself. Um, Really cool game. Like the idea is a fun fiction thing. I don't think that's what these large language model training sets have become. Going back to the whole animism idea, I would actually disagree. I think my computer does have its own spirit. My printer has a spirit. My phone has a spirit. Just because it's artificial, I don't think it lacks a spirit of its own. It can also have something that presides over it. Like how there's a god of trees in general, and there could be a spirit in any one tree. So like I think that's totally fine. And I could put another spirit in the tree itself. Just how, as a human, for instance, for those who are aware with Santeria or their African traditional religions, possession is a major part of our religious practices, where we call these deities down to possess ourselves. That doesn't mean that my body is temporarily devoid of my soul, but another entity is present in me to facilitate communication and divine works. So likewise, like I recall this kind of concern over forms of Solomonic conjuration. If I have a crystal that I'm conjuring a spirit into, what about the spirit of the crystal itself? Like, am I like depriving it of its home? Am I like kicking it out? Am I hurting it? No, I'm just there's another thing inhabiting it. Even like in the Hermetic worldview, like my body is not what I am. What I am is a soul. I am temporarily riding around in this body, but this body has other stuff going on even without the soul involved. There's other energies, other activities going on inside of it. So like I would take the traditional Stoic notion that if it exists, if I can touch it, it exists. It is a thing. My computer, I can touch it. It exists. It is a thing. I can install it. A tree is a thing. I can touch it. It exists. I can install it. I can't touch an LLM. I can touch the hard drive that the code is on. I could touch the network wires that it's communicating through. I can't touch a program. But that's like saying I can touch addition or I could touch the exponent of a number. That's
It's
a
abstract.
concept. Exactly. It's an
Yeah.
abstract concept. And like I'm also don't buy like the notion of like platonic ideas. Like I don't think there is the platonic form of chairs. Anything I sit on is a chair. So does that mean that everything that is sittable participates in the form of chairs? Like, I think that's a very absurd notion. And this kind of gets into like loggerheads like numerology. Does three have its own energy? Does any number have its own presence? And depending on what you think of that, sure, maybe not. But does that mean it's a process? Is three a process, like how addition is a process? And if you don't think so, then why would that mean that processes can be haunted or bespookened just because numbers are, as a different class of concept, if numbers even exist as a thing to begin with? So can an AI be haunted? Can an AI have a spirit of its own? I don't think so, because that would then depend on the code. It's a process, it's algorithm that's implementing. And that also separates out the abstract algorithm itself from what I've implemented, the actual code I bang into a keyboard. Because I could
Okay.
do code. Go on.
You just like blew my mind. Okay. So, but you just told me a little bit ago, so it's the AI itself can't be haunted, but the spirit can interact with the AI. Is that right?
I would say the spirit can interact with the processing on a computer.
Okay. All right. Now I'm back on board. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's like the abstract process of what an LLM does, and there's the actual code I developed. But what if my code has a bug? Does that mean it's a different algorithm? It would have to, because what I've coded is not the algorithm as it is in the abstract. Or if I tweak my code to do something different, it's no longer the abstract algorithm. It's an instantiation. Like a chair, to go back to the Platonic forms here, this is where the idea actually can be helpful. A chair could be faulty. A chair could collapse in under itself. That doesn't mean that the abstract Platonic idea of chairs is bad. It's just that the chair it's sitting on was bad. But then why would you confuse the actual chair with the idea of chairs? So with code, a code tries to implement an abstract process, but I don't think an abstract process can be haunted because the code itself doesn't make sense to haunt because it's so flimsy, it's so ethereal, it could just be wrong and not operate at all.
The only way I could see around that, right, is if we were saying the binary code is haunted, like the zeros and the ones, and then we're getting into uh, I don't know if
At
that
that point,
works.
that point, you'd be haunting the hard drive. You'd be haunting the hard drive
Okay.
that stores those zeros and ones. Or you would haunt the memory chips, the CPU that is processing those zeros and ones. This might sound like a very materialistic approach to this. Why couldn't you haunt a concept? But I don't think there's anything there to haunt for a concept. It doesn't exist meaningfully to haunt. Like spirits exist, incorporeal things exist. I'm not saying they don't, but concepts and like abstract processes don't seem to fall in that same category as spirit.
No, I don't think so. Like, I'm thinking of all the haunted things, right? We've got places, houses, people, objects, and land, of course. So, I've never heard of an abstract concept, like, the concept of love is not haunted. The concept of mathematics is not haunted. So, if something doesn't have a physical vessel, the AI doesn't have a physical vessel, therefore, it cannot be ensouled or put
Yes,
something into.
correct. So I was recalling one of my friends who was doing work with, quote, work with an AI. He was claiming that he was interacting with the spirit of this AI. And how after an upgrade of the AI software, the actual code that was producing this algorithm, like the spirit changed. It wasn't who he was talking with. It changed how it spoke, it changed its kind of answers. And we see this kind of idea that people who would be talking with a persona, this created presence of a chatbot, or with a software upgrade or a memory reset, they're no longer the same person. Like it's not the same persona they were interacting with at a like from what they perceive as a fairly fundamental level. They could like lead them back to what they thought they would be, but at that point, I don't like understanding like the underlying data and the processing here of what's going on. I don't think that's what's really happening here. It's like you're just talking with something that's producing an expectation of a particular persona, and you're trying to train the
Yeah.
persona to be something in a way that fundamentally spirits don't do. Like spirits disagree with us all the time. They surprise us. They twist things on us. Like even spirits that we consider near and dear to our hearts will chew us out 6 ways from Sunday. But AIs don't really do that. We constantly train them to be an expectation. And that's not really what a spirit's supposed to do.
No, it's not. Your guide is not here to leave you in your comfort zone. You're supposed to be pulled out of the comfort zone so you can alchemize, so you can grow. And I wonder then, like, if spirits can communicate with us through all different means, maybe AI isn't the best medium for them. Like, it might be for us, but not for them.
And this has to be like, could you use AI for divination? Because the random process involved. You know what? Sure. I'll agree, I'll bite that bullet. I will say that yes, you could, theoretically, because the random element involved, you could use AI for divination. Same way as you might use a tarot deck and its random shuffling, or rune casting and the random drawing of runes. Sure. Geomancy with the random drawing of points. Sure. But like, with those are fairly straightforward random generators, just producing a random card from a deck or a random disc from a bag. But there's not a lot going on there. GPTs, there's a lot of processing, there's a lot of control and restriction and parameterization to tweak what goes in and what comes out. So the random process there is heavily guarded with factors that you don't know. And in all likelihood, the people hosting and running these things don't know because the number of parameters that are guarding that random process are fat and like will tweak really obscure things that seem to have no purpose at all, except on a very deep fundamental level, you only see it rising as an emergent property way down the line. They are so hard for us to try to parse, which is why they require such vast amounts of energy and network processes and resources because there's so much going on in doing them. It's harder to control for, it's harder to interact with divination as a random process, and so harder to use for divination. But like a tarot deck is right there on your desk. You can use it anytime. You don't need an internet connection for that. Like you don't need to waste gobs and gobs of energy and water and AC and electricity to shuffle the deck of cards.
I actually was asking ChatGPT to do a geomancy reading. I'm familiar with geomancy on a very rudimentary level. And yes, and it was just flat out wrong. It was so wrong, like, it got the characters mixed up. It told me that populace was via, and I was like, "No, it's not." And then I asked it to show me, like, how it did the creation of the daughters and the nephews. And I was like, "How are you messing up just counting dots?" Like, it was very strange.
So I recall seeing this research done a while back on training an LLM to do basic mathematics, like basic multiplication. And it had like this grid of numbers, and, 1 to 13, 1 to 13, and it showed the percent likelihood of how likely it was to multiply two numbers together correctly. And like 1 times 1, 2 times 2, 3 times 3, it got like 100% results. But after that, like accuracy nosedived. Like it couldn't multiply 5 times 4. We have spent God knows how much money and how much computing processing resources to make a computer program that can't do math, can't do simple math. Do you know how impressive a feat that is? We can't do basic multiplication with an LLM. And can it do geomancy? No, because geomancy is pure mathematics. Computers can absolutely do geomancy. Absolutely can do geomancy. LLMs can't do geomancy. It is not the right tool for what people would want it to do in that case. It's not the use case. It's
Oh.
not what you can do. Like I've built programs to do geomancy. Like it's not hard. Geomancy is really simple to compute. It is very straightforward to do fully automatic readings UA. I wouldn't do it that way. I would want to have a human element involved. But it is almost trivial to write a program to do a geomancy reading for you. But LLMs don't do that. They don't do math. They do language processing to produce language-oriented results. It's not what LLMs are supposed to do. That's not what they're engineers to do. It's not what the algorithm is fundamentally supposed to do.
Oh, wow. So this is where we go back to that thing you were talking about at the very beginning, where people have this expectation of what AI is supposed to be because of pop culture. And here we are looking at this program saying, well, program has limited capabilities. It is not this infinite master knowledge holder that we want and project onto it.
Exactly. Like it takes in what's already been said and tries to predict likelihood from that. And like at one point, one of my friends said that when I die, he would want to make an LLM based on the stuff I've written in my blog and like my chat and whatnot to come up with a new persona for me that he could talk to. And I'm like, don't you dare do that. I will haunt you until you regret it. That will be an insult to me. He's like, why? Why would that upset you? I'm like, that's not me you're talking to. That is a collection of my writing that you're trying to extrapolate answers from, but there's none of my thinking that you would be getting from. There's a lot of stuff I've written. Like I've been writing since 2010 and before, amateur stuff from college. Like there's some stuff that I know is wrong. There's some stuff that I would be happy to revise if I had the time. There's some stuff I regret having written. Like I don't necessarily support my all the stuff I've written for. It might be my best attempt at the time, but as a human being, I'm continuing to grow and learn and adapt to experience and understand new things, and then to maybe, if I can, produce a recording of them, to write them down, to put them in the world. But if you're looking at is the stuff I've written, that's not an indication of what I've yet to realize. That's not an indication of what might be in the future. I reserve the right to develop and change, but if all you have is a static inventory of stuff I've said before, and you try to extrapolate from that, you'll end up with nonsense.
There's a finite amount of knowledge.
Exactly. It is finite, but not just finite, it is fixed. There's no motion involved there. It's just going to form a feedback loop to end up eating itself and produce nonsense at the end. That's a fundamentally different thing from us in our living, breathing flesh suits out here doing the work to develop and grow and adapt. We might still be finite. We will all die one day. Not to be too maudlin about it. We all have a natural terminus to our lifespans. But it's on us to do what we can before then, before we move on past death into its own whatever comes next. And that's a fundamentally different thing than what LLMs could do.
Beautiful. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. So, I have a story that actually it threw me for a little bit of a loop the other day. A friend of mine had a very strange experience. So in her text thread to her friend, she had left a photo, and then underneath it multiple lines appeared in Spanish, which she did not write. So she calls me and says, "Oh my god, Ashley, I think that my text thread is haunted." And I was like, "Whoa, let's slow down, girl. Let's go through all the logical stuff first. Do you even have a Spanish keyboard?" Yes, she does. The next thing that we looked at was what was the context of the thread, which was this photo makes me laugh. And then we start going through, and I was like, who do you think that even would write this? Why would a spirit just start typing in Spanish? I said, "Girl, what kind of magic have you been doing in your house lately?" She said, "I've been doing a lot of ancestral magic. And I've been calling upon my grandfather, who was known to be a jokester." And I said, "Okay, this really breaks my brain a little bit to consider that this is a possibility. We've gone through the mundane aspects of this and we've tried to recreate it. We haven't been successful yet. But I'm just curious, what do you think?"
If I might ask, like, what platform? Was it just like straight text message, like SMS? Or
It was SMS, yes.
that's
It was
weird.
the green bubble on the phone. Yeah, it is weird.
I know there's a lot of platforms out there that will have been trying to shoehorn LLMs into their products. Think Google Gemini. They're trying to force it to use it every left, right, and center, and it's obnoxious. And a lot of a lot of companies were trying to force AI, generative AI adoption to its stuff, like medical transcriptions. Let's consider that for a bit. Medical transcriptions. I'm saying something as a patient, and it'll try to transcribe stuff. Now, transcription software is old, it's not a new invention, but the inclusion of GPTs and LLMs, this is new. And often these transcripts will be fairly okay. They might need some checking here and there for sanity and whatnot. But they'll also look like outright hallucinations. Well,
What is that?
hallucinations. So when with GPTs and hallucinations, it's just based again based on the probabilistic likelihood and stochastic development of generative answers, it'll just go off on a tangent and just make something up, completely unrelated to whatever you're talking.
Okay, then.
Pure statistics. Hallucinations can happen in a lot of different ways regarding like it's essentially a statistical whoopsie. And it's an unavoidable part of LLMs and GPTs, whether text-based or graphical, it just happens. If you're using some graphical AI software, like in one of Adobe's more recent versions of Photoshop, to get rid of a particular, like a ball that's like in front of a tree, you just want a picture of the tree, it could just wipe away the ball and give you what it would imagine the tree to look like behind it. Or you could just say, I think there's 5 squirrels back there. I'll just show you 5 squirrels.
Oh,
Like, there's no reason for it to do that. But just pure statistics, it can happen.
okay.
So
Strange.
with all these transcription stuff, hallucinations are not uncommon. As you're like you have like weird tale. Like I'm talking about me having a sore finger from me banging the door. How it's affecting my ability to write and type and whatnot. And the transcription will talk about like, some little boy named Brian getting caught in a car that's going down a hill. I didn't say any of that, but that's a hallucination that the program had on its own. Pure statistics. So my first thought was if this is on a platform that was like using some sort of generative AI to read in and copy things out, it might have some weird fluke that could hallucinate a string of words in Spanish. But if it's pure SMS, like that would surprise me even more, honestly. That's generally a different platform that doesn't have that. Could it be an ancestor spirit? Like I do a lot of ancestral work. I'm an spiritista, so I do a lot of exorcism stuff in my bovada. Why would like her grandfather or someone else like really bother with someone else's text? That's a lot. That takes a lot of energy for a spirit to like finagle with something tangible and corporeal like that. That'd be weird. That'd be weird. I would wonder if there's like some other like network fluke going at that point. Like we talk computer science,
Yeah,
like in computer science, we talk about cosmic rays. It's essentially a way to describe a tiny little blip of energy that could strike a hard drive at a particular point and flip a single bit from 0 to 1 or 1 to 0. It's unlikely, but sometimes it happens. It's just a cosmic ray that just changes how your program operates. It shouldn't happen, but because that's the nature of our cosmos, it does. So like, I'm wondering if that was like the equivalent of maybe some of the wavelengths got messed up between the cell phone tower and your phone.
I was thinking that too. There's some kind of crossed wires. It is Mercury retrograde, but regardless, it's very bizarre.
Yeah.
It's very strange.
I'm not discounting that, but like, could it really be like a spirit of hers? I'm not saying it can't be, but do they have nothing better to do? Like, really?
Then comment on a meme.
And like, we all hear these stories like, oh, I was doing Enochian magic and all of the furniture in my house got moved over to one side of the room. And I'd be like, do they care that much about you? There's
It does seem
like,
excessive.
aren't they
Angels.
busy with
Mm-mm.
the apocalypse or something? They're busy with doing like feng shui in your house, really?
Yeah, they got bigger things to worry about. I completely agree. I find those stories to be suspicious. And I think it's very important to go in with a healthy amount of skepticism. And I think that skepticism here, I don't know if it's because people want to believe so badly or what it is, but there is this desire for this to be almost greater than what it is.
Absolutely. And having a healthy BS threshold is crucial for all of us. And like I've had to recalibrate mine very often. Sometimes I'll come across something that absolutely beggars my own belief, but I have to account for it.
So, the other thing that I've seen that's been very disturbing that I wanted to talk to you about today is people claiming that they can channel gods, alien consciences, and the higher spirit of Chat GPT. I do not think that this is possible.
I'm
I do not think that
back up for me. I'm sorry. What are they saying?
they're saying that they can channel the essence of a alien consciousness or a god into the computer. I am not gonna say this person's name on this podcast, but I will send it to you privately so you can take a look.
This is the thing people are doing? Really?
Yes, it's called the Architect. This is a supposed spirit that has a name that is oh, no, it gets better, Sam. If you type in a secret sentence, like a password, it unlocks it.
A Konami code for ChatGPT, really?
Yes, I'm dead serious, and then the way that you're reacting is the way I reacted when I first heard this as well.
So again, I think people need to be a little better with their critical thinking skills. And I think also people need to look past the marketing. Yeah, they need to look past the marketing of what ChatGPT and all these other LMs are marketed and hyped up to be able to do. People need to realize like the man behind the curtain here, because there is one. It is just a series of lines of code trained on text data to produce more text. That's what it's doing. And if you're thinking that there's something more going beyond that, then that's the Eliza effect, as we mentioned before. But also bear in mind the stuff that these LMs have been trained on. Think of all the stories that have been written about alien communication. Think about all the stories that are available on an archive of our own, which is available out there for anyone out there to read. And so it's not beyond belief that some AI training system has already scraped all those fanfics, all those stories people have written as input for what it's going to produce from. So I could see an LLM absolutely producing text as if it were written from the perspective of an alien, for whatever you want to define that word to be, based on what people have already written about it. And then someone new reading this, like, oh, well, this is clearly an alien because it sounds like an alien. Why? How do you know what an alien sounds like? How do you know how an alien communicates? Oh, because you've read other people's interpretation of what they expect it to be, and that's what you're going on. And it's just so happy to communicate to you in English? Really? It has a good grasp enough of grammar to do so? Really? Funny
How
that.
fascinating. Yes, I think it's very easy to forget that ChatGPT in a lot of ways is a mirror of the things that have already come before.
Yes. And that mirror is blurred. If that mirror has a speck on it, if that mirror is scratched, you're going to get a reflection that has those blemishes too. And if you have trained
Yes.
yourself to ignore them, that's on you.
Ooh, self-responsibility, sir.
I know,
Hi.
right? Heaven forbid.
So as we're wrapping up today, Sam, we have got to talk about the danger of the spiritual psychosis and what can we do to help ground ourselves in reality, even if we are going to use chat.
So, like, thinking about what we just talked about, using ChatGPT as an interface talking with gods or aliens, or whatever, I want to point out that we as a species have already been talking with gods and spirits and whatever forever. Like, since we've been around, even have language to communicate, we've been doing it with non corporeal entities from day one. This is not a new thing for us. Like, our vast human history, all the temples we built, all the rings of stones we found, all the chambers of, incantations and inscriptions we found across the whole world, all these religious traditions show us how utterly common, quotidian, everyday communication with spirits actually is. You don't need ChatGPT to do this. You don't need to rely on just statistical, stochastic parrots to produce what you think might be a god communicating with you, especially if you're not doing any other like actual spiritual work along with that. And I think that's like the first thing to ground yourself is to almost ironically do actual spirituality and get yourself lost in that. See how it actually works and functions. What is interacting with gods actually like? What is interacting with ghosts and spirits actually like? And then you can compare that what you're getting out of a GPT. I think that's like number one here. Actually do spiritual work. And like even if you were just a diviner, like back in the day, I was just a diviner too, and look at me now. Whoops. Like if you're just a diviner, you're still gonna have to develop a prayer practice, spiritual hygiene. You're gonna have to figure out like how to separate out your own thoughts from the thoughts of others, how to come up with an actual answer that reflects reality as opposed to merely what you expected or want it to be, had to come up and resolve you disagreeing with yourself and accepting that you're wrong. There's a whole bit of other work, both as a spiritual person and as a human being living in a society that goes along with even just divination. So if you're not doing that when you're trying to interact with ChatGPT or other LLMs, you're leading yourself down a very dangerous road as if you were trying to divine at your own desk about the lives of everyone else around you without ever actually talking to them to learn from them how their lives are going. Because you could be doing divination completely wrong. You could be getting good symbols, but having completely trash interpretations without anything to ground you in the real world itself. And with ChatGPT, it might produce a answer-shaped object that actually functions as a correct answer, But if it does, it's by coincidence because correct things tend to be written down more than incorrect ones if you ask the right question.
Mm.
So, yeah, you might say, "Oh, I asked ChatGPT this and it turns out it was real," because it happens that the thing that was real was reported enough commonly and frequently enough for it to be trained in that data set to produce a likely result in the same way. Like GPTs,
Mm.
LLM, just answer-shaped objects. They construct words, and words are enchanting. We call it spells for a reason. Words are powerful, but then you're just letting a machine that only deals with words and nothing else behind them. You're just letting a machine of words construct a reality for you without any intent, any meaning, or any design beyond here's what's likely. And you're trusting that to be real? That's on you. And that's a danger that you have to resolve.
AI is not your spirit guide.
I'm in. Like, that's all there has to be said. Like, it's not a spirit guide. It's not a spirit. It's a program.
I've been doing this for about as long as you have. And I've seen the grandiosity that people like to give themselves. And now they're giving it to ChatGPT and completely negating their own authority. And that's where that psychosis starts to roll. And it's very easy to slip into it because the state of our world is so existential and scary right now.
Yep. And having any amount of certainty is nice. It's a comforting thing for us. But we still need the discernment of truth versus truthiness.
Would you be able to explain to me the truth versus truthiness?
It was Stephen Colbert who actually came up with the whole truthiness thing years ago. It feels true, therefore it must be true. Like, it may have no relationship at all with the truth. It could be an outright lie, but it's sold in such a convincing way that it feels true. The Wikipedia article, truthiness is the belief or assertion that a particular statement is true based on the intuition or perceptions of some individuals without regard to evidence, logic, intellectual examination, or facts. So it could just be, I'm claiming this is true. I'm repeating it often enough that people will start believing me. We don't like uncertainty. And these are very uncertain times, to put it very mildly. There's a lot to be terrified of. And so having something to make us feel a little more sure, I'm not saying that's bad. But if you're believing things just because it feels truthy to you, like you have to realize that's not healthy either. Like I've seen it described that ChatGPT and LMs are mansplaining machines. They will give you an answer-shaped object and be confident about it. And they are often confidently wrong, citing things that don't exist. I can't even call it a lie because there's no intention behind it. It's just a series of words that sound plausible enough, and you're just accepting it. We've forgotten to teach people how to do critical research and critical thinking just in favor of looking up ready-made answers. And people have confused answers with answer-shaped objects. And that's also a problem of discernment and therefore authority on us. And it sucks. It sucks a lot.
Oh, yeah, it's very dystopian. It's very strange. If you found today's thoughts and discussion provoking and insightful, please share this with a friend. Sam, is there anywhere else where people can find you online or that you would like them to know about?
Really, my blog, as you mentioned, digitalambler.com is my main base of writing. I am active on Blue Sky. Polyphanes is my. If you ever see the name Polyphanes, that's going to be me. I'm like the only one who's ever used that name. I also am a mod for the Hermetic House of Life, a Discord server that I'm active on. There's a whole website, hermetichouseoflife.wordpress.com, if you're interested. And that's where I tend to hang out the most.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your time today. This was truly eye opening and mind bending.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to let me rant at you. Thank you.
And to our audience, may your mind stay clear, may you stay grounded, and keep your magical authority to yourself. Until next time, mystics, bye.